If this power were restored to us, we could, I think, soon put a stop to by far the greater part of the sin and misery with which we are surrounded. These letters were written only a few weeks after Ernest had been ordained, but they are nothing to others that he wrote a little later on. In his eagerness to regenerate the Church of England, and through this the universe, by the means which Prior had suggested to him, it occurred to him to try to familiarize himself with the habits and thoughts of the poor by going and living among them. I think he got this notion from Kingsley's Alton Locke, which, High Churchman though he for this nonce was, he had devoured as he had devoured Stanley's Life of Arnold, Dickens' novels, and whatever other literary garbage of the day was most likely to do him harm. At any rate, he actually put his scheme into practice, and took lodgings in Ashpit Place, a small street in the neighbourhood of Drury Lane Theatre, in a house of which the landlady was the widow of a cabman. This lady occupied the whole ground floor. In the front kitchen there was a tinker. The back kitchen was let to a bellows mender. On the first floor came Ernest with his 2 rooms, which he furnished comfortably, for one must draw the line somewhere. The 2 upper floors were parcelled out among 4 different sets of lodgers. There was a tailor named Holt, a drunken fellow who used to beat his wife at night till her screams woke the house. Above him there was another tailor with a wife but no children. These people were Wesleyans, given to drink but not noisy. The 2 back rooms were held by single ladies, who it seemed to Ernest must be respectably connected, for well-dressed gentlemanly-looking young men used to go up and down the stairs past Ernest's rooms, to call at any rate on Miss Snow. Ernest had heard her door slam after they had passed. He thought too that some of them went to see Miss Maitland's. Mrs. Jupp, the landlady, told Ernest that these were brothers and cousins of Miss Snow's, and that she was herself looking out for a situation as a governess, but at present had an engagement as an actress at the Drury Lane Theatre. Ernest asked whether Miss Maitland in the top back was also looking out for a situation, and was told she was wanting an engagement as a milliner. He believed whatever Mrs. Jupp told him. Chapter 54. This move on Ernest's part was variously commented upon by his friends, the general opinion being that it was just like Pontifex, who was sure to do something unusual wherever he went, but that on the whole the idea was commendable. Christina could not restrain herself when on sounding her clerical neighbours she found them inclined to applaud her son for conduct which they idealized into something much more self-denying than it really was. She did not quite like his living in such an unaristocratic neighbourhood, but what he was doing would probably get into the newspapers, and then great people would take notice of him. Besides, it would be very cheap. Down among these poor people he could live for next to nothing, and might put by a great deal of his income. As for temptations, there could be few or none in such a place as that. This argument about cheapness was the one which she most successfully met Theobald, who grumbled more suo that he had no sympathy with his son's extravagance and conceit. When Christina pointed out to him that it would be cheap, he replied that there was something in that. On Ernest himself the effect was to confirm the good opinion of himself which had been growing upon him ever since he had begun to read for orders, and to make him flatter himself that he was among the few who were ready to give up all for Christ. Ere long he began to conceive of himself as a man with a mission and a great future. His lightest and most hastily formed opinions began to be of momentous importance to him, and he inflicted them, as I have already shown, on his old friends, week by week becoming more and more entêté with himself and his own crotchets. I should like well enough to draw a veil over this part of my hero's career, but cannot do so without marring my story. In the spring of 1859 I find him writing: I cannot call the visible church Christian till its fruits are Christian, that is, until the fruits of the members of the Church of England are in conformity, or something like conformity, with her teaching. I cordially agree with the teaching of the Church of England in most respects, but she says one thing and does another, and until excommunication, yes, and wholesale excommunication, be resorted to, I cannot call her a Christian institution. I should begin with our rector, and if I found it necessary to follow him up by excommunicating the bishop, I should not flinch even from this. The present London rectors are hopeless people to deal with. My own is one of the best of them, but the moment Pryer and I show signs of wanting to attack an evil in a way not recognized by routine, or of remedying anything about which no outcry has been made, we are met with, "I cannot think what you mean by all of this disturbance. Nobody else among the clergy sees these things, and I have no wish to be the first to begin turning things topsy-turvy." And then people call him a sensible man. I have no patience with them. However, we know what we want, and as I wrote to Dawson the other day, I have a scheme on foot which will, I think, fairly meet the requirements of the case. But we want more money, and my first move towards getting this has not turned out quite so satisfactorily as Pryer and I had hoped. We shall, however, I doubt not, retrieve it shortly. When Ernest came to London he intended to do a good deal of house-to-house visiting, but Pryer had talked him out of this even before he settled down in his new and strangely chosen apartments. The line he now took was that if people wanted Christ, they must prove their want by taking some little trouble, and the trouble required of them was that they should come and seek him, Ernest, out. There he was in the midst of them ready to teach. If people did not choose to come to him, it was no fault of his. "My great business here," he writes again to Dawson, "is to observe. I am not doing much in parish work beyond my share of the daily services. I have a man's Bible class and a boys' Bible class, and a good many young men and boys to whom I give instruction one way or another. Then there are Sunday school children with whom I fill my room on a Sunday evening as full as it will hold, and let them sing hymns and chants. They like this. I do a great deal of reading, chiefly of books which Pryer and I think most likely to help. We find nothing comparable to the Jesuits. Pryer is a thorough gentleman, and an admirable man of business, no less observant of the things of this world, in fact, than of the things above. By a brilliant coup he has retrieved, or nearly so, a rather serious loss which threatened to delay indefinitely the execution of our great scheme. He and I daily gather fresh principles. I believe great things are before me, and I am strong in the hope of being able by and by to effect much. As for you, I bid you Godspeed. Be bold but logical, speculative but cautious, daringly courageous but properly circumspect withal, etc., etc. I think this may do for the present. End of chapter 54. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman.